Tommy Robinson is going to be having a conversation. This is from several years ago. He sits down with Imam Tawhidi, who is a British Muslim originally from Iran, and he pushes the idea of moderate Islam. He's pro-Israel, believes in Zionism. He's a very outspoken supporter of Israel and the Jewish people. And Tommy challenges him on the idea of reforming Islam. Is that possible? So listen to this very interesting discussion and make sure to subscribe, like the video, leave your comments. Follow me at Rafi the Realtor on Instagram for all of your South Florida real estate needs. And you can support the channel by clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description or pinned comment. Let's get into it.
Imam Tawhidi is one of the world's leading imams and a highly regarded scholar of the Quran and Islamic history. He's nicknamed the Imam of Peace. He is known for his outspoken and honest discussion of the culture and ideological problems within the religion. I want to sit down with him to learn more about the true history of Islam. Welcome to UK, Imam Tawhidi.
Thank you very much, brother.
And for the people who are just watching this who don't know who you have probably become the most famous imam in the world for people, I'd say, that are on our side of the circle. Do you want to explain to them why that is? Or do you want me to explain why it is?
Well, I'd like you to explain it from your point of view.
I'll say from my point of view, you've become the first religious imam that has come out and said what I think many of the times needs to be said. You talk about taking violent passages out of the scripture. You challenge the scripture. And it's really, because we first had contact when? We first had contact when I was leading the English Defence League. And even when we had that contact then, I was surprised, if I'm honest, because I'm leading the biggest street protest movement against Islam at the time. Every Muslim leader was very critical. You wasn't. More so, you sort of reached out at that time, talking openly, yeah.
Indeed. I travelled to Iran, where I was born originally, but we migrated to Australia. I went back to Iran in 2006, and I engaged in my studies. And during my studies,
So pardon me, just wanted to say Australia, not Britain, because I originally said English guy. But that's neither here nor there.
saw a lot of corruption within the political system of how the Islamic governments control the students and what they study, which at the end leads to missionaries coming to the West from these Islamic governments, being trained and funded. And I was once upon a time one of these missionaries that would be sent around the world to Canada and so on to preach Sharia law, spreading the caliphate under different names, Islamic government, or and even Sharia courts and so on. When I saw this corruption, I criticized them. I paid a very heavy price, interrogations, prisons. And then
What, in Iran?
In
You
Iran.
was in prison in Iran?
Yes.
For challenging it in 2006?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
And it was actually 2012.
2012, okay.
Yes, in Iran. And I moved to Iraq, and I got involved in a few media projects. And then after I saw that my presence in Iraq is actually silencing a lot of what I can do, I moved out to the West and I started using social media to criticize the corruption.
Okay. And that's when we spoke in 2012?
Yes.
Because even when you spoke to me then, you received backlash, yeah?
Indeed, indeed. And I was very surprised to see your approach, because I knew that there are people that hate Islam and Muslims, but you were approaching the whole situation from a very political perspective, and you were very different from other people. Like even when there were people that would go out and cause violence, I saw you to be a bit more different. You came out on television and you knew what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And that encouraged me to reach out to you. And I think we spoke about terminologies and how you could win a lot of my type of Muslims over by directing the blame onto Wahhabis and Salafis rather than other small minorities.
Yeah, because I gathered so you were a Shia.
Yes.
And you said a lot of our problems, which I have many Shias tell me this, but then I have many Sunnis say the opposite. So I have many Shias who would say to me that what you're angry about is the Salafists, it's the Wahhabists, it's the Saudis. That's what I should be angry about. That's the problems that I see. And that's pretty much, I think, at the time what you was getting at.
Yes, but there were other things that I didn't tell you because I was living within those areas and my communications could be monitored. The Shia also have problems with Hezbollah and the Iranian regime, and we've seen what they've been doing lately. So yeah, I think it's more of terminologies that, if used properly, can actually lead to better results when clashing with them in the media or even on diplomatic level.
So right now, as an imam, what are you fighting for? Reformation of Islam?
I say reformation of Islam, but in reality, I know very well there will never be a reformation.
You know very well there'll never be a reformation.
There will never be a reformation of Islam.
I'm glad you said that.
But we will need to pave the way for a potential reformation in a few centuries' time.
So when we hear that, from my point of view, because we have so many reformist Muslims in the UK, such as Majid Nawaz and Quilliam, who basically, this is a massive career for them, and they're selling a lie that we will reform Islam in the next generation. And it's like we've had 1400 years, it's not reformed. When someone's tried to reform it, we've had the Wahhabists, Abdul Wahhab, who tried to reform Islam, and we brought it back to the core, what I'd say is violent teachings. But you don't see there is any opportunity or any chance to reform?
The idea of reforming something that was once upon a time introduced as perfect,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. It's already perfect. So it's not like Islam was introduced in Mecca as another option or a theory or a new way of life. It was introduced as the perfect and the only way of life for all human beings. And when you come with such an approach, it's very hard to turn around and say, let's reform what is already perfect. What the Wahhabis did is that he sold a bigger lie, and he said, hey, let's live how the Prophet Muhammad lived, because that's the perfect image of man. So then he's more of a fundamentalist rather than a reformer in modern times. What I believe in when it comes to reform is that there will be a type of reform, but it's reformed individuals like myself. It will be a reformed Muslim community of third and fourth generation migrants, Muslim migrants to the UK, to Canada, to America, to Australia. People who no longer feel the attachment to what's happening in Syria and Iraq. For example, if most of these Middle Eastern families today have satellite dishes in their homes, whether they be legally or illegally, they have satellite dishes, and some of them require permits in certain countries such as Australia, some don't. When a father watches bombings happening in Syria, that emotional attachment of, yeah, let's send money to Syria, only exists within the father. It will no longer exist within the son and then the grandson. When you watch something in the news, you feel in debt to go and help out, interfering with what's happening over there.
See, the problem is, we see the opposite though. On the ground in the UK, the first generations that come were not extreme. The extreme, in fact, every generation we go through in the British Muslim community, they get worse and worse. Their views and their intolerance gets worse. And that's, by any Pew research or any research, it shows actually, even for example, it's the youngsters now. The majority of terrorist attacks now are 17 to 24-year-olds. That's the majority of arrests, and now youngsters. And that we've seen that change over the last 20 years, from being elder Muslims to then going into the youngsters. So for us to think, I've said so many times, what we need is a worldwide revolution within the Islamic community to get rid of the hatred. But that's not what we see. So, you know, say I'm an Englishman, and should I sit here, or should our country sit here and gamble on the chance? What do you think the realistic opportunity is for there to be a revolution, or for there to be a mass uprising from Muslim youth who are going to throw away the detachment to this extremism?
It will never happen.
It will never happen. So as an Englishman, see, this is why I say we have to stop Islam. We don't have to stop extremist Islam. We don't have to stop radical Muslims. We have to stop Islam in the UK. And I say that in the sense that I'm a father of three. When I look at what previous forefathers done in this nation to protect and preserve a safe and prosperous Britain for the next generation of children, we're sitting by and hiding behind political correctness to sit here and watch as last year 2,000 British Muslims returned from fighting for ISIS. We're just sitting here like sitting ducks, and that's why. So I have to. What would you do if you was an Englishman, if you was a non-Muslim, sitting in a country that's ravaged by Islam, that's seen 3 brutal terrorist attacks in the last 12 months, 4, killing children, killing women, sitting eating dinner, stabbed in the neck. We've seen all of this. We've seen 12 prevented. What would you do?
I wouldn't blame you for any of the opinions you hold. And probably I would have the same stance and position towards such an ideology. However, we need to be very realistic. We could sit down and discuss and talk and share emotions and even propose certain things in parliaments and draft bills. But if we're not realistic, we're not going to be reaching a result. And this is how I am very different from many people that I sit with. We need to be realistic. Now, you want to stop Islam. Islam's never going to stop.
No, okay, I want to stop its influence in Britain.
You're never going to be able to. Let me tell you why. As much as I want to stop the radicals in Sydney, in Australia, it's very difficult, and this is why. Let's look at the Jewish community. The Jewish community, for tens of centuries, they've been persecuted, massacred and killed. They never had a government to protect them before Israel. They don't have Sharia law tables in the streets and in the city calling people to Judaism, dawah. In fact, when a Jewish man wants to marry a lady and she decides to convert into Judaism, it's a very hard process for her to become Jewish. And amongst all of these problems, Judaism still exists, and there are many Jewish people out there. It's not easy to take a religion and just hope for it to vanish or stop it. It doesn't work like that. Especially when you look at the statistics and how much they are growing and the children they are having. Most Muslim families, in fact, most Middle Eastern families, mostly the Muslim of them, amongst them, drive vans and big cars. Why? Because
6, 7 kids.
Exactly.
Is that fluke? Or is that population jihad?
Look, my mother has 11 siblings. She's number 12, and one of them died from one mother and one father. When you're dealing with such a mentality that says, hey, lots of children is a beautiful thing in life,
Is that the reason? That's the point I'm making. Is that the reason, or is it literally population rise in order to conquer areas?
I will tell you this. Before the government of Saudi Arabia and before the influence of the Iranian Revolution, it was very normal and it would be seen cultural, it's a national practice for certain countries to have families to have lots of children.
It was for the Irish as well.
But now, I do believe that there are actually political movements behind that, to actually fund families that have lots of children.
Yeah.
And we see that in Ahwaz, in Iran, between Iran and southern Iraq.
In order to change the demographics,
region, yes.
So they have control of that area.
And they're funded by the Saudis. Funded by the Saudis. Okay. Father, don't worry, we'll take care of your children.
We'll take care of everything.
Just make children.
Make children, yeah. Okay, so yeah, because we see this. When you say there's not much we could do, say for example to halt that in the UK, all we'd have to do is stop the benefits for more than 2 children, and that would pretty instantly stop the ability for people to have. Say for example, my local imam, Kadir, yeah? He has 3 wives and 14 children, yeah, that we pay for. So and there's so many Muslim families like that across the UK, but we're paying for it. If we didn't have a benefit system that gave them and provided for that, they wouldn't be in a position to do it unless Saudis pulled out their wallets, which they probably would as well. But when you say there's not much we can do to halt it, I think there is. I think we could be stopping Muslim immigration into the UK. I think we could halt the benefit system for more than 2 children. We could stop any Saudi or Iranian or Qatari money coming into this country. We can outlaw all aspects of Sharia law in the UK. We can make it. If someone wants to be a peaceful, kind Muslim, fine. You live your life in Britain, we welcome you. If you want to be a radical extremist, then we need to make your life absolutely impossible. So that's where I see it as, because you're right, you have to be realistic in it. Realistically, we have 3 million, 4 million, probably more like 6 million Muslims in the UK. Do I want to deport every one of them? No, of course I don't. Some of the best people I've met growing up in my hometown have been Muslim. But we do have to limit the influence that this ideology has on our country. And if people don't, when you say, if people don't want to live under freedom and democracy, they can leave.
Indeed.
They can leave.
I agree. Now, cutting the funding and so on, do you really think that's realistic?
As in the sense of because they own so much of our country?
Yeah.
Am I right? I think Saudis own every port in the UK. They own the percentage of the stock market. But that's when you come to the point of basically they've bought our country. They've bought our legally they've bought our country. They own Westfield Shopping Centre. They own Harrods. They own the majority of London. And but that is something where our politicians have sold our land and sold our people out. So the British public would halt their money tomorrow. And if that meant having less money in your paycheck at the end of the month, we'd have less money. If that meant entering into a recession, we'd enter into a recession. We don't want blood money in our do which is what we have. So do you not think that's realistic then?
I think it is a realistic vision, but to implement it, it's a whole different story. I don't think the UK government would be willing to cut ties with Saudi Arabia and Qatar that owns many mansions within the UK, massive buildings in very prominent locations. I don't think
they've bought our country.
Therefore, I think we need to start from a whole different angle. Instead of going after the finance, look, any radical in the UK can write a book. A man sitting in Saudi Arabia can buy 1 million copies of that book, and that's how the transaction is made, through royalties. It doesn't really need to be through embassies.
Okay.
You can't stop money from coming from A to B. They can send you a lady wearing lots of gold, and then she gives you the gold. No tax in airports, it's her jewelry. There are many methods these people use, and trust me, this is their field.
They're already doing all of that.
They know how to scam the system. They know all the loopholes. I think what we need to do is take down these Sharia courts that you have.
Yep.
Sharia courts and this scam of halal certification.
You're against halal certification?
Yes, I'm not against halal food.
You're against the certification which generates the money which then propagates and supports terrorism.
These two main wings of the Muslim community in the UK, the Sharia courts, which have no legitimacy whatsoever on this land to begin with. It goes against the constitution.
Why do you think our government allowed them?
Governments are a combination of organizations that need money. What makes a government? Several organizations put together, and they need money to survive. When you look at Sharia courts, in reality, I brought up Sharia courts and that issue because it's a very minor issue.
Yeah.
What's greater than that is trying to stop the UK educational system from taking money from the Saudi royals. That's much greater. That I can't tackle. But I could tackle Sharia courts by bringing victims and having their cases being addressed in Parliament and then slowly suing the court itself. So Sharia court is something we can manage to go against. Very realistic. Sharia courts can be tackled in this country. Polygamy, FGM, these sort of issues. But if we're going to say, let's stop the educational system from taking money from Saudi Arabia, and King Walid has this much in Oxford, and this guy has that chair in another university.
They're buying into all the major universities.
You can't stop an educational system. It's a business. We can't stop it.
Okay.
But Sharia court is not a government department. It's government registered, and it's licensed as a ministry, but it can be dealt with if we can prove their flaws in a legal way. The halal certification,
which you can do easily, because there's so many victims who have been sent back to violent husbands. There's children that have been taken off their parents, like under Sharia, when a child gets to the age of 7, taken straight off the father and taken straight off the mother, given to the father.
Yes.
That's all happening in the UK already. That's happening right now. But yeah, you know halal certification.
yes.
Do you agree that funds?
Okay, so there's a lot to watch there, but I don't want to post the entire episode here. So you can definitely check it out by searching Tommy Robinson and Imam Tawhidi. Tawhidi is Tawhidi. And ultimately, what I think here is England is in a very tough predicament because there are Muslims who are, cooperative and they don't want to cause trouble and they're peaceful. But there needs to be very strict laws in place that England sets, and that's going to ultimately take for Keir Starmer to resign or someone else to get elected that really puts their foot down. Otherwise, things are not going to change. So it is possible that at some point Tommy may become the prime minister. It's not unheard of. Donald Trump became president of the United States, and everyone thought it was a joke. But if Tommy runs and he's voted in, it's very possible. So it's interesting because this imam, I think, has to battle himself with his own religion because he's trying to be a moderate person, and I think he makes very sound arguments. But being an imam, he has to moderate a religion. It's a very interesting thing. It's an interesting concept. It's like Reform Judaism, and Reform Judaism, it exists, but it's got a lot of challenges. It's got a lot of challenges. And I don't really think Judaism really needs much reformation at this point. Like Orthodox Judaism, for the most part, is already quite peaceful. Yeah, you have extremist people among Orthodox Jews. You have people that take Judaism too far. But for the most part, most religious Jews are very peaceful people. With that said, make sure to subscribe, like the video, leave your comments, follow me at Rafi the Realtor for all of your real estate needs in Miami and the greater South Florida area. And you can support this channel and send some dough by going to the Buy Me a Coffee link in the pinned comment or description. Until next time. Peace.